talk about the beautiful business of milk today. Yeah. I got milk. Let's talk about milk. Oh yeah, baby, let's talk about the beautiful business of milk today.
This episode of Got Milk is sponsored by Shunya Agritech, the folks revolutionizing cattle nutrition with hydroponic green fodder. Visit their website at shunya.live for more details or download the Shunya app from Play Store or App Store.
Okay, get ready because today we're going deep, driving deep into dairy.
Dairy, yeah.
The global economics of milk. I've been looking over all this data you sent over
Oh, yeah.
about the Indian dairy industry, and wow.
You've got, let's see, academic articles in there, global milk statistics.
There's so much.
It's going to be super interesting to kind of unpack this whole thing about how India, well, they have the largest dairy herd on the planet, right?
Right.
So how do they compare to all the other big, milk producers?
Exactly. And we're not just talking about like counting cows. We're going to look at milk yields.
Mm-hmm.
The rise of specialty milks, like A2 milk.
Interesting stuff.
And even, how technology is changing the way cows are cared for and milk is produced.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole world behind that carton of milk you get at the store.
Absolutely.
And we're going to uncover it.
We're going to uncover it, so let's jump in.
Okay.
The data shows that India has 43.6 million dairy cows,
Wow.
which makes up over 16% of the global dairy cow population.
Sure.
That's more than double the number of cows in the United States.
It's true. India is like the undisputed champion
Yeah.
when it comes to cow population.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Even though they have this massive herd, India only produces about 2/3 the amount of milk the U.S. does.
So more cows, but less milk.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
Well, the key is milk yield.
Okay.
So that's the average amount of milk each cow produces.
Right.
And this is where we start to see some really big global differences.
So the data you gave me shows that the average cow in Saudi Arabia produces over 10,000 liters of milk per year.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
That's almost 5 times the global average.
It really shows you how Saudi Arabia is using all this new technology
Uh-huh.
and modern breeding techniques to get the most milk production possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, the U.S. isn't that far behind,
Right.
with an average yield over 9,000 liters per cow.
So where does India fit into all of this?
Well, India's dairy industry is a little more complicated, I guess.
Oh.
You've got a mix of small-scale farmers, using those traditional methods,
Yeah.
but then you've got those larger, more modernized operations too. So all this diversity. In farming practices, it means their average milk yield is lower than countries like, Saudi Arabia and the U.S.
And our sources show that India is really trying to increase their milk production.
Yeah,
There's a lot of talk about genomic selection.
right.
What is that exactly?
Okay, so genomic selection. It's kind of like a superpower for dairy farmers.
A superpower, huh?
Yeah, it lets them analyze the cow's DNA
Uh-huh.
and identify those cows that have the best genes for milk production.
Interesting.
It's like you can predict which cows will be the best milk producers even before they start producing milk.
So they're like matchmaking for cows.
Matchmaking, yeah, to make super milk-producing herds.
Exactly.
So by breeding cows selectively, using these superior genetics, Indian dairy farmers can improve the overall health of their herd, right? And get more milk. And this could have a big impact on India's dairy industry as a whole,
Oh,
Make them more competitive and help them meet that growing demand for milk in India.
This is all fascinating, but let's be real. When you're at the store and you're staring at all those milk cartons, you're not thinking about cow genetics.
Probably not.
You're probably just trying to figure out what kind of milk to buy.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that brings us to one of the most interesting trends we found, the rise of A2 milk.
Yes. Our deep dive uncovered a lot about A2 milk. It comes from specific Indian cow breeds,
Right.
and it's marketed as easier to digest and maybe even having other health benefits.
Yeah.
What's the science behind that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? There's a lot of buzz about A2 milk,
Yeah.
but the science, it's still kind of mixed.
Okay.
Some studies say A2 milk might be easier on the stomach, compared to regular milk.
Mhm.
Regular milk has both A1 and A2 beta-casein proteins,
Right.
but we need more research to really know for sure.
So the jury's still out on the health benefits.
Yeah, pretty much.
But whether the science is there or not, it seems like A2 milk is getting popular, especially in India.
Oh, yeah. And it's really interesting to see how what consumers want and how things are marketed can really shape the dairy industry.
Uh-huh.
This whole A2 milk thing, it shows there's a growing demand for these, special milk products, the ones people think are healthier or more natural.
And from an economic standpoint, A2 milk could be huge for India.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the big picture, A2 milk could totally change global dairy trade. Imagine if demand for this special milk goes way up.
Right.
It would give Indian dairy farmers a big advantage in the global market.
It's kind of like what happened with almond milk or oat milk.
Yeah, kind of.
But A2 milk has this added cultural layer that's rooted in Indian tradition and these indigenous cow breeds. That makes it even more appealing.
Totally. It's a really cool example of how food trends, economics, and even cultural identity can all come together.
Now, let's switch gears for a second. Our research found something that might surprise you about dairy farming. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Oh, what's that?
Precision dairy farming.
Oh, right.
It's amazing how technology is changing how cows are managed and cared for.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Our sources mention everything: electronic ID systems, automatic body condition scoring. There are even robotic milking systems.
It's true. These innovations are total game changers. They can increase efficiency,
Huh?
improve animal well-being, and, of course, boost milk production.
Wow.
It's all about using technology to get the most out of every part of dairy farming.
Hold on. Automatic body condition scoring. What's that?
So picture this, a system that uses sensors or cameras
Okay.
to look at a cow's body and figure out its condition. Like, is it gaining weight, losing weight?
Huh.
This helps farmers make sure the cows are getting the right nutrition.
So farmers don't have to weigh each cow by hand anymore.
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
But this technology gives them all sorts of data.
Oh, I see.
That helps them decide how to feed the cows and manage them better overall.
And what about those robotic milking systems? It sounds like a futuristic farm.
They're pretty amazing. These robots can milk cows 24/7, and they collect all this data on the milk quality. They can even tell if a cow is getting sick early on.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like every cow has a high-tech personal assistant.
Right.
But all this fancy technology, what about the smaller dairy farms? Can they afford to keep up with all this?
That's a good question. And it brings us to all the challenges and opportunities facing the dairy industry as a whole.
I mean, it's not all, sunshine and robotic milkmaids.
Right.
There are some real challenges here when we think about the future of dairy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So as technology keeps advancing and the demand for dairy products keeps growing, we have to think about the challenges that come with it, like sustainability, animal welfare, and what it all means for those smaller dairy farms economically.
Right. And our deep dive, pointed out some concerns about the environmental impact of dairy farming. What are the big issues there, and what kind of solutions are people looking at?
Well, one of the biggest things people are worried about is greenhouse gas emissions,
Right.
specifically methane.
From the cows.
Yeah, cows produce methane during digestion. So researchers are looking at all sorts of ways to reduce those emissions,
Okay.
like changing their diet
Mhm.
or even using technology to capture methane and turn it into energy.
So less cow burps, better for the planet.
Exactly. And then there's animal welfare. There's a big movement now to make farming practices more humane. That means giving cows more space, letting them graze in pastures, and just generally taking better care of them.
That sounds good for the cows and the environment. But what about those smaller dairy farms? The ones that might not be able to afford all this new technology.
That's a good point. But there are programs out there to help those farmers, give them training, help them get access to more affordable technology, and even help them connect with markets where they can get a better price for their milk.
So it's about making them more competitive and more sustainable.
Exactly. And consumers have a role to play, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you buy dairy products that come from farms that care about sustainability and animal welfare, you're supporting those practices.
So it all comes back to us, in a way.
It does.
That's pretty amazing, all the effort that's going into creating a better future for dairy, a more ethical, sustainable future.
It really is. But it's important to remember that this is a journey.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. There's always more to be done.
Speaking of ongoing journeys, Our global milk stats showed some interesting things about milk consumption around the world, some patterns.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, the data says that, on average, people drink about 50 kilograms of milk per year, globally.
Okay.
But in the European Union, it's almost double that.
Really?
Yeah, those Europeans really love their dairy. Why is that?
Well, milk is a big part of a lot of European cuisines. Think about it, they use it in everything.
Uh-huh.
Creamy sauces,
Oh,
soups,
Yeah.
cheeses, yogurts.
Right, it's
Oh.
everywhere.
And it's not just milk. The data shows that cheese consumption is huge in Europe, too.
Oh, for sure. In 2009, the average person in the EU ate something like 18 kilograms of cheese in a year.
That's a lot of cheese.
It is. Germany and France are famous for their dairy, right?
Yeah, huh?
But they actually consume less milk than the average European.
Really?
Yeah, but they make up for it with cheese and butter.
So it's all about balance. What about the UK? Where do they stand?
The UK. They are the milk-drinking champs. In 2009, they drank a whopping 116 kilograms of milk per person per year.
Okay, that's a serious amount of milk.
It is. But it shows you how important dairy is in diets all over the world.
And all that milk has to come from somewhere.
Right.
Which brings us to the wild world of dairy trade.
Great, huh? The data showed us some big players in the global milk market.
Oh, yeah. Who are we talking about?
Well, when it comes to importing fresh milk, Italy is at the top of the list. In 2009, they imported over 2 million tons of milk.
Wow.
That's a lot of milk crossing borders.
Yeah.
What about exports?
For exports, Germany is the big one. They ship out over 2.5 million tons of milk every year.
So they're like the Amazon of milk.
Haha, pretty much. And when you look at total dairy imports, the UK comes in third place globally.
They also really love their cheese.
Seems like it. But all this trade makes you wonder,
About what?
how is milk being produced in different parts of the world? Are cows living the same way on a farm in New Zealand as they are in, say, Austria?
That's a great question. And I guess there's no one right answer, is there?
Nope, not really. Housing systems for cows are all different. It depends on the region, the type of farm.
Right.
So some cows might be out grazing in a field,
Oh.
while others are kept inside all year round. And even the indoor systems are different. Some have more space, some give cows more freedom to move around.
Our deep dive found that in the EU, millions of dairy cows are kept in tie stalls, or they're zero grazed, meaning they don't go out to pasture at all. What does that mean for the cows?
Well, that kind of housing system raises some concerns about animal welfare. Cows are natural grazers,
Yeah.
So if they can't move around, it can cause health problems, and it might affect their overall well-being.
That makes sense. We have to think about how different farming practices affect the animals. Speaking of health problems, our research mentions some of the biggest welfare challenges that dairy cows face globally.
One of the biggest ones is lameness.
Like,
It's a common problem in dairy herds everywhere. In the U.S., studies show that about 38% of dairy cows have lameness at some point in their lives.
wow, that's a lot. What causes that, and can you prevent it?
Lameness can be caused by all sorts of things.
Like what?
Their genes,
Okay.
the type of flooring in the barn,
Hmm.
hoof care, and how the farm is managed overall.
So this isn't just a problem in the U.S.
No, not at all. In the UK, lameness has actually been increasing in recent decades, which means we really need to keep researching this and finding better ways to take care of the cows.
Wow, this deep dive has really shown us how complicated the dairy industry is.
It is complex.
It's fascinating, but kind of overwhelming, too.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Milk yields, global trade, animal welfare, the environmental impact.
It's a lot.
It is. It just shows how much the dairy industry affects all of us and the planet.
And it affects us whether we realize it or not. Every time we buy milk, every glass we pour, it's all connected to this huge global system.
Yeah, it really makes you think, You open the fridge, grab a carton of milk, and you don't even think about all this.
It's true. It's like this whole amazing story behind something so simple, all about human ingenuity, how farming has changed over time, and how the whole world is connected by food.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. India's huge dairy herds,
Right.
A2 milk.
Precision technology on farms. What stands out to you from all this?
What strikes me is the dairy industry is at a crossroads. On the one hand, we have all these amazing technologies that could make dairy farming more efficient, more sustainable, more humane even.
Right.
But then we have to think about the ethics of it all. Make sure these technologies help the animals, help the farmers, not just about making more money.
I see what you mean. We can't just adopt any technology without thinking about the consequences.
Exactly. And I think that's where consumers come in. You know,
Okay.
when you're buying dairy, where you buy it from, what kind of milk you choose, those choices make a difference. They can actually shape the whole industry.
So it's about more than just what we put in our coffee. It's about making choices we can feel good about.
That's it. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this whole deep dive.
I agree. This has definitely changed how I see that carton of milk in my fridge.
That's great. I mean, that's what a good deep dive should do, make you curious, make you think critically, and maybe even see the world a little differently.
I think you nailed it. Here's something to think about while you're enjoying that next glass of milk or scoop of ice cream. What if A2 milk really does become popular everywhere? How would that change global dairy trade?
Good question.
And what other new innovations might we see in the dairy industry? Innovations that help solve some of those challenges we talked about. Keep those questions flowing. And until next time, happy moosing.
I got milk.